Let's take a deep breath in and a deep breath out. I was born less than 1 month after the fall of the communist regime. And even though I was born in a capitalist country, the transition from communism to capitalism is still going on today. Romania was a communist country for more than 40 years, and entire generations were indoctrinated with the specific communist beliefs. And since I'm a very curious person who believes that knowing yourself is one of the most important things that you can do, I began watching a docuseries about communism and how life was for people in that regime. What was interesting is that I found out different expressions that my parents use or used to use that actually came from the communist propaganda. We are very much influenced by our context, and even more so in a communist country where the education of the new human, as they called it, went on as far as to dictate different kinds of rules inside families. Their goal was to have everyone working for the greater good of the country, many times at the expense of family life. For instance, aside from the regular work schedule or school schedule, people of almost all ages had to do patriotic work. And that was basically work that they had to do without getting paid. All of this in the context of working 6 days per week. Watching this docuseries actually helped me understand my parents better and their context and how they were educated and what they believed was important in different situations. But it also made me feel grateful for how different my life is and how different life is here in general today. For instance, at some point, many Hollywood movies were banned. And before they were banned, they were censored, meaning that they were cutting different parts of the movies that, for instance, showed big houses or other different things that the communist regime wasn't happy with people seeing. Another interesting fact that I learned from my brother about how life was in the communist regime came up in a conversation about one of the interviews that you've heard on the Gratitude podcast with Natalie. I was very impressed by the fact that she actually had days in which she didn't eat. And we have an expression here in Romania. It can't be translated precisely, but it's something like this: dying of starvation. To be dying of starvation, it's like being so poor that you don't have enough money to buy food. And as I was telling my brother that, I was very impressed by this situation because even though we sometimes use this expression, it actually never happened. But it seems that Natalie wasn't the only one that had that experience. He went through that quite a few times growing up in the communist regime. He didn't die of starvation, but he did go through days without eating. And honestly, I was shocked. But seeing these docuseries, I've learned that putting food on the table was something really, really hard. At times you even risked getting arrested or getting your friends arrested that could offer you some food for your family. The food supply for the population was limited because Ceausescu wanted to export as much as possible to pay the country's debts. And for the bare necessities of everyday life, people had to wait in queues that were hours long. And before reaching the counter, they might have had the surprise of having nothing there to buy for the family. I remember another story that my brother told me about something that we have an abundance of: bananas. They were very expensive back then and could only afford them before Christmas. And even though they were green, people didn't have the patience to wait for them to get yellow, and so most people ate them like that. They ate them green, even though the taste isn't as good, and from my knowledge, they aren't as healthy as well. But now, at least here, we have bananas everywhere, and the quality of most of them is pretty good. You may or may not be able to identify with these stories, but I'm sure you have your own stories from older siblings or from your parents of how life was in their days and how your life is today. And in spite of all of the hardships that we are going through nowadays, people back then could only dream of the life we have today. And I, for one, am really thankful for that. And I'm actually going to buy some bananas to celebrate. This has been Georgian Benta. Thank you so much for listening and for sharing, for subscribing. And like always, don't forget to keep seeking and spreading gratitude.